2 weeks ago. Every 2 weeks, Wednesday night, we record the CU podcast. The day after the last podcast was actually the 25th anniversary of the release of the U.S. Sega Genesis Mega Drive in Europe and Japan. 2 weeks later, tomorrow, August 29th, 1989, 25th anniversary of the release of the Turbografx-16, the U.S. version of the PC Engine. So we're going to sort of talk about, we're not going to go into delve into this that much. We're going to talk about, though, what did that mean at the time to me and to Ian when you had two real competitive systems come out and try to at least give the NES a run for its money. And I remember it quite fondly because there were a decent amount of advertisements on the TV for the Genesis, and I remember seeing a decent amount for the Turbografx-16. Now, the Turbografx-16, much to its detriment, and I've talked about the marketing scheme, which was terrible. They only put it out in major markets. Northern Jersey, where I lived, Central Jersey, was a major market. It was close up New York City that you could find them. Not in every store, but Toys R Us's, Toys R Us's did have Turbografx-16s where I lived, and also some of the other stores. Toys R We. There you go. And so I think it was interesting because you were 4 years after the NES. You're a little bit older. Maybe you want something new. So I think that was good. And plus, the Genesis was a damn fine system, as was the Turbo, that now we have real competition. We joked last week about what would have happened if Nintendo played fair against the 7800 and Sega Master System. We kind of concluded that we're not sure much would have changed. The NES probably still would have dominated. Maybe not to that extent, but they still would have dominated. But now we have a time where other game companies now have a chance to, come into the U.S. home market.
Right. It's, okay, so these companies come out with their systems, and unlike the Atari 7800, which was basically laughed off the lunch table, the Genesis and the Turbografx, it was show us what you have. And I was lucky enough to have one rich friend who was an asshole. Who he was, but I put up with him for his video games, who had both. And I was blown away by both. I really liked both systems. I think I probably liked the Turbografx more. But the Genesis stuck with me too, to the point where the Genesis was, I think, the first system I bought with my own money. I think it might have been a Game Boy, but the Genesis was next. And it was only because the Genesis had lasted. But it was the first time as a kid, because when you're a kid, you tend to live in your own little insular world. You get your Nintendo Power, you have your Nintendo is all you know. And then you see, holy crap, there's all these other companies coming out with games, and video games are about to blow up, and they're about to get huge. And I think that's what was exciting at the time, was going over to my buddy's house for an afternoon and eating ham and cheese sandwiches and playing Bonk's Adventure and being like, this is different. This feels different. This looks different.
Sounds different.
Everything about it was very different. Then you played Altered Beast, which a lot of people hate, but I still actually like.
No, I like Altered Beast.
I like Altered Beast a lot, and I really like Altered Beast. And you play that, and it's just like, you see a hobby at a young age. You see it about to evolve, and you realize it's going to turn into something more. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think was most interesting. As far as the legacies, the Turbografx legacy, it was kind of the
Turbografx was popular for about a year and a half.
Turbografx, the legacy of the Turbografx is more of a modern story. And it's more of a modern collector's story, aside from people like myself and a few of my friends who have been, diehard fans of Turbo and PC Engine forever. It didn't really leave a legacy until it became the hot item to collect. But the Genesis did an amazing job of getting an install base and really exciting customers, and it even gave the Super Nintendo a run for its money.
And the Genesis was the first gaming icon after Mario.
Yeah, with Sonic the Hedgehog.
I looked at the Genesis at like WCW versus WF. There was a time when they were beating Nintendo and gave it a run for its money, but then they faltered, obviously, with too many unnecessary consoles within a few years.
I hate you for coming up with that analogy, because that's perfect, and I wish I could have come up with that, because that's exactly what it was. Genesis was the WCW to NES or Nintendo's.
Yeah, they put out just as good or a better product for a period of time, whether it was 2 to 3 years, and then they just got overconfident. Here comes the Sega CD. Here comes the 32X. we'll do a third one. Here comes the Sega Saturn, all within like 3 years, and it's like, what the hell just happened?
And then it was like,
what happened? Like they had it, right? They had it. They had it.
And then they signed a bunch of good wrestlers, and they booked them real well, and they released the Dreamcast, but no one fucking cared at that point.
Yeah, at that point, it was too late. The
Sorry,
good
guys,
was gone.
we, ladies and gentlemen, we have no wrestling talk tonight, so we're going to make wrestling analogies.
Let's talk about the release titles. I have it up here.
All right.
And actually, surprisingly, I only guessed a couple of these as launch titles. The Genesis didn't have a strong launch title.
No.
It came with Altered Beast.
Last Battle was one of them.
Last Battle, Space Harrier 2, Super Thunderblade, Thunder Force 2, and Tommy Lasorda Baseball. That was the U.S. launch titles. That's it.
No Super Hang-On?
That probably came out a few months later. If you look at the first year,
I was about to cheer.
We just looked at video game years for 1989.
Yeah, you're right.
There was no real big hits. You know what I mean? If you want to say Thunder Force 2 was a big hit, I don't think it was.
No.
They had a lot.
No. Thunder Force 2 fucking sucks, and so does... Did you say Space Harrier 2?
Space Harrier 2.
Yeah, that's awful,
But
too.
these weren't games, when you think of the Genesis, these aren't the games you think of besides Altered Beast because it was a pack launch title. If it wasn't, no one would give a shit about it, honestly. But the first sort of 6 months of the Genesis was a lot of sports titles, which was important, though, because the Genesis is lauded for its sports titles versus Super Nintendo, which did poorer for sports titles.
Right.
Which was good. That was enough to get into a lot of teenagers'
Even if you get into the period of time where the Super Nintendo is beating the Genesis, ask anyone what system had the better NHL games.
Better EA football Madden games.
Yeah, or the better NHL games.
Better baseball games, all of them.
Oh, World Series baseball, any version of that game was fantastic.
I mean, the biggest baseball game on the Super Nintendo was Ken Griffey Jr. Baseball, and that's it's okay.
Super Batter Up is pretty fun.
But I mean, in terms of a simulation, they really didn't have it. It was all in the Sega Genesis.
The interesting thing about the Genesis too, and I don't think it's brought up enough when you talk about the Genesis's legacy, is I think it was an easy way for maybe PC gamers to transition into console games, because EA
had a lot of releases.
EA went out of their way. And and other companies too, like Westwood did maybe it wasn't Westwood. A bunch of companies did ports of various PC RPGs,
Sword of Sodan, games like that.
Sword of Sodan, all of the flight simulators.
You're right.
The simulators and the RPGs really were a grab at the PC market.
I never thought about it. Wow, it's a really great point. The Super Nintendo, there wasn't to that extent. You did have an Ultima on that, but those were years afterwards.
Right, and they were butchered. You know, the ports you got on the Genesis, they were fairly close. There's even a version of King's Bounty on the Genesis, which plays fantastically, which is the first in the series of the Heroes of Might and Magic series. Like, they really did, okay, you didn't buy a Nintendo because you think this is kiddie stuff, but check out this F-117 stealth bomber game that we've got for you.
And the Sega Genesis was, like we said, it was a WCW. It did punch Nintendo right in the mouth.
Yeah.
And because that was a point where Nintendo didn't look invincible, largely because of their anti-violence, anti-blood, with Mortal Kombat and Super Nintendo, which was a debacle. And Genesis said, "Hey, we're the system for teenagers. You're the kiddie console, Nintendo." And that stuck for a very, very, very long time. Some people say even now.
The blood, the Sims, it portrayed itself, even if it was in a brash and kind of annoying way, it definitely portrayed itself as an adult console. And I think that worked in its favor.
It worked for a good 5 years.
Yeah, for quite some time.
Yeah. Now, Turbografx-16, we'll talk about its launch titles real quick. Half of these I knew. Half it's like, these are the games when you find a stash of Turbografx-16 of some reason in your store, or the 3 times I found them in a swap meet, you're going to find Alien Crush, China Warrior, Dungeon Explorer, most likely, Keith Courage and Alpha Zones, which was the packing title, Power Golf, R-Type, Legendary Axe, Victory Run, and Vigilante.
So most of those are very good, though.
They are, and I had 3 or 4 of those. I had Legendary Axe, which was the first big game on the system before Bonk. The same way, you had Altered Beast was a big game before Sonic the Hedgehog. That was that, because Keith Courage is pretty average.
I like Keith Courage.
I like it too, but it's average.
It's repetitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's repetitive, but I like it. Legendary Axe was good, not as good as the sequel, but it was a game. It
won awards when it came out.
It showed off the system very well. Alien Crush is phenomenal. I sometimes think I like it better than Devil's Crush. I can never make up my mind.
China Warrior.
The only weak one in that bunch really is China Warrior and Power Golf.
Yeah, I'm not. I haven't even played. I don't think I even played Power Golf before.
I have.
It's just like standard golf game. It's like NES golf.
No, it's just I like golf games, but it's not a good one. China Warrior though
was used to show off.
Did do a service. Yeah,
it showed off the graphic potential in their commercials. I still remember these commercials making fun. Wow, Turbografx and Genesis just took shots at Nintendo, like open shots across the bow, because China Warrior, I talked about this in my Turbografx Christmas special, China Warrior, they compared against Kung Fu, and how literally China Warrior, the guy's almost the entire screen, and Kung Fu, he's so small. Now, of course, it's not fair because Kung Fu was a game that came out 7 years before, but
Kung Fu is more fun, and Vigilante is the follow-up to Kung Fu.
That's the funny part, and that's why I saw my video. Vigilante is the same, it's IREM, and it's a follow-up. They should have compared that.
Right.
And Vigilante is actually fun.
But you can't pit one of your launch games against another one of your launch
I remember
games.
being like, what? They did what? But the legacy, like we said, the legacy of the Turbografx was, it was popular for probably a good year and a half before the Genesis really got its foothold and emerged as the dominant 16-bit system. Now, technically, the Turbografx-16 was only 8-bit, but it looks like 16-bit. So that's how we judge
8-bit with a 16-bit graphics processor.
It had the Turbo CD, which came out in 90, which was 3-4 years for the Sega CD version. So that's really its legacy, is that.
Everyone in the
store,
shooters,
yeah.
Everyone in the store loves to come in and be like, "That's a Sega CD. That's the first CD system." And it's just like, I usually just bite my tongue, but sometimes I'm like, "No, you're wrong."
You just punch Mario in the nose.
It's all your fault, you little.
It wasn't even though they were on computers. Technically before
right.
You can get a computer CD-ROM. Actually, by 90, you could get them. They're expensive. But no, that's the legacy. The Turbografx took chances and risks before it took chances with the CD add-on, which was expensive, but it did. And the Turbo Express was a huge risk that unfortunately was too expensive. It was having a mini system. If they came out with just that as the system itself, that probably would have been bad, and it made look up to the TV.
It's sad because I know we're not talking about the Japanese release, but the PC Engine took risks too. As being the first CD-ROM system, and that's what gave that system its nearly infinite lifespan. I mean, they released games all the way up until like 96 or some stupid shit like that on the Turbo CD. It was a zombie-based game. It might have even been later than that. It was a visual novel, but still, I mean, CD, adopting CD early on was a wise move for NEC.
Early. Yeah, they were doing things that...
Not here, but overseas, that was a big deal.
So they were doing stuff before even the Super Famicom was even out. They were doing CD games. So think about that. While you still had the Famicom, which by then was like 6 years old in Japan, you had CD games with full motion, sound and some video. So... All right, I'm happy. I keep the Genesis. I like the Genesis. I don't have the exposure to it that I had the NES, obviously.
Oh, people gave you some crap last week.
Oh, yeah?
People gave you some crap like, "Oh, if you don't like the Genesis, why'd you buy this or that?"
Why'd you buy so damn now?